I got a grant, long story short, from the Pennsylvania Council of the Arts to do we came up with an idea that we would start a project. He was collaborating with lots of people. Keith, part of what Keith did was collaborate with, he would draw a mural and people would draw inside the mural. He would let kids help him with the mural. And he started to collaborate with people. He started to meet the same, some of the same people that I had met, Timothy Leary, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, some of these intellectual artists, whatever, in New York, Robert Rauschenberg. And one of the things that we all share this common interest in this other worldly tradition in which art is sort of the vehicle for that, in which you were expressing some of these, whatever you want to call it. The words are no good. As soon as I put it into words, it's not it. You've got to understand that. As soon as I say something like spiritual, that's not it. Cosmic truth, that's not it. As soon as you say it, it's not it. But you try to point to something and say some other dimension of reality that comes into this dimension through art. And so the first thing, whenever this thing plays, if you ever hear Keith and me talking, it's always about if you don't define something. Maybe I'll get fined. I can act as like collecting this stuff, putting it down until we see whether we have something, and then talking about it, you know. Anyway, see, I think that any way that you want to do it, right. I mean, I have a rough idea in my head what I think they're going to do, but that's sort of, I guess, part of the... So the whole thing was to not define it. That was what was interesting about the project. I pitched him on the idea, and he thought that was cool. Let's do something, and when somebody asks us what we're doing, we're not going to define it. So it was like, let's not limit it. Let's just do this thing. You collaborate with all these people. Let's just do this project. Let's work together and see what comes of it. So I got the grant, had the studio. We met a bunch of times on that subject. And I started doing these kinds of things, globes and maps. So I'd paint my vision over the whole world. It's a simple thing to say, you understand. That's the idea, is that you're transforming the world with your vision. That's another way of saying what you're doing. So I would do that with globes and maps. He thought they were cool. Then there's this thing about galleries. And what was interesting is that as soon as I did that, he wrote me this thing, he liked them. And immediately, I sent my work around and I got this show. This was the first one-person show that I did in New York of globes and worlds. That was him around that time in his studio. Black light work. This is in the basement of Tony Schifrazi's gallery. The whole thing was ultraviolet light, and he did a bunch of ultraviolet paintings. So this thing with Andy Warhol. He became very close friends with Andy Warhol. I was not friends with Andy Warhol and decided not to be. Just it was a decision I made. I just didn't want to be friends with him because I thought he was moving art in a direction that I didn't think it was the best direction to move it in. And he was also moving Keith in that direction. That was my opinion. And I was never very, again, it's something I wish I would have been a little, Keith knew it. He could intuit that I wasn't going along with all this. I would be there with Keith. We'd be doing something. Andy would, because it was always an entourage when Andy would be coming, and I would leave. And that started to happen long enough that he figured out what was going on. I didn't want to be part of this scene because I thought it was something the matter with this scene. Basically, there were lots of drug addicts, a lot of heroin addicts, lots of kind of very questionable people that hung around with Andy. And I just thought, well, I don't know. But Keith thought it was great. And it provided the opportunity, not the explanation to get his art out to the world and to productize it and to make it. And so Keith always had this way of spiritualizing, of purifying it. So Andy, I wouldn't say he had really a negative effect, but it was sort of pushing out. They changed him. He became a superstar. You meet Andy Warhol. If Andy Warhol likes you, you're going to become a superstar, and that's what happened, and very fast because of all these connections. It's just happened immediately. The idea for the pop shop came up, and he opened this thing in New York. So he could do this on any scale. I mean, I've seen him do 50-foot paintings with a broom. It doesn't matter, and he would make these awesome things, like amazing. Everything like a jigsaw would all fit together, you know. So you watch him paint, it was like watching some genius on the piano that you can't wait and see their hands move. There's something amazing going on with this guy. And he was like inspired, very inspired when he did it. To the extent that there is spirituality in his work and religion, he was very anti-organized religion, very anti-organized religion. But only because it was what he saw it as it kept people from a sense of true spirituality because of the organizational and institutional aspects of it. As he found out that he had AIDS, and he knew what was going on, and it became a very tragic situation at that time. His lover died of AIDS, and it kept getting closer and closer. So he matured very fast. He died when he was, 30, but he went through a lot in his lifetime. He became an old man. AIDS sort of turns you into, destroys your immune system. It's sort of like you're aging. So his work got very tortured and it went through a whole series of that kind of thing. So, and I remember as soon as I saw this work, it was clear to me what was going on, and it was sad, and he was trying to come to terms with death, his imminent death as a young person. So what happens, even though he's a young guy, and the stuff that's popularized, the stuff that you see would be the baby and the stuff that's on T-shirts or whatever, but this was a mature artist that went through every phase of being a human being in his very short lifetime. So the deeper you dig into his work, the more you find that he's coming to terms with life and death in very deep ways. Very near the end, then he really found himself free again. He became like a child again. He knew he was going to die. Once he had accepted dying, he just came out with this amazing work near the end of his life that was just joyful and awesome and incredible and made everybody happy again, and it was cool. And we spent a lot of time talking about death, and because death is it's just an important subject. But I had been fired illegally from school, and I had 2 kids to support. I was back here. My life had fallen apart. I was getting divorced. He became a superstar, and he was dying. And so at the end, it was very sad that this project that we were working on was never going to quite come to anything that beyond what we had talked about. And it was sort of like, so we kept making plans, and as he kept getting closer to dying, it was very clear what was going on, and this just happened recently with my dad. It's the same way. We had these plans. And he knew he was going to die. Is it going to be a month? Is it going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be 3 months? Well, we'll keep working on this thing. Then he dies, and then you have this stuff, that you're working on. So I'm publishing this book of my dad's. And so for the last, 25 years, I've carried on this project. This was the last thing he did. He's going to die. And you would see him one day, he'd have different scabs and scars, and he was just, it was terrible. It was very hard to watch him die. And, but he painted this BMW, So he was in there with the jet set, with the big money crowd, He became a beautiful person and hung around with all those people. And my whole experience with him let me understand that it was empty, not worth pursuing. And that was a big freedom for me in life. And you have to know that it's not worth it, that you will lose your soul, that you will be very careful. Be very careful. People can tell you it's not about money, it's not about fortune and fame, but good luck. Good luck trying not to live for money. It's not simple, man. And you're going to drive yourself a little batty trying to do it, because everybody around you is going to be doing it, Why'd you do that? For the money, man. You ask yourself, when you walk down the street, why are people doing what they're doing? They're doing it for the money. So, and this is one guy I met who never did it for the money, and by the time he died, his stuff was worth tons and tons of money. But I just decided I wasn't going to do that. So for 10 years after that, more than 10 years, I worked completely anonymously. I worked on the internet, and part of what I'm interested in is the destruction of this cult of celebrity, and I've talked to you about it more than once, is that this idea that we idolize these superstars and whatever is one of our problems. It's no different than idolizing anything and a false religion. It's the same. We have this false religion of celebrity worship and consumerism and media culture, and you can see people who are obsessed with it, and they're not really living their own lives. They're living a vicarious life out there, worshiping false idols. So it was always this thing with Keith, but he became a toy of the rich and famous, and so if somebody has that car now, how many $1 million it's worth. So I started to memorialize some of this stuff and to come to terms with it in my own way, psychologically.